at Autodesk. And we'll be talking today a little bit about Configurator 360. I'm going to give a couple, maybe like a minute or two more. I see people are kind of starting to come in, so bear with me. All right, good morning, folks. For those of you who have just joined, a little introduction of myself. My name is Daniel Luby. I'm a cloud manufacturing technical specialist at Autodesk. I've been asked by Applied Engineering to come in today and talk a little bit about automating design and sales using some of the automation tools and technologies that Autodesk has to offer. So if we kind of get into the presentation here, I want to start with this. I want to attract everyone's attention to the screen. Do you know what this is? Most of us do. This is the Genuine Crockpot. This is a tool that we've all used for a very long time. It's gotten fancier and more sophisticated over the years, but if we really look deep into this product and its core functionality, it's still the exact same, right? It's for slow cooking. And our outcome can always be, or can be a delicious meal, but what's the biggest frustration with this piece of equipment or this tool, right? It's the long preparation time. So what better way to introduce the typical bidding process, right? The typical bidding process, and this could also be a typical quote process, generally follows the same construct from business to business. It just depends on the tools you use to do each of these areas within the workflow, right? So if we start in the upfront, requirements capture. When a customer comes to you or to a group of people they're looking to get quotes from, they're submitting their requirements, what it is they want, what it is that they need this thing to do, right? And then your organization or your company takes that information, the requirements, and starts to build out and configure a product that matches what they're looking for. At the same time, and this can be sequential as well as concurrent, you may have an estimation group or some individual within the organization that also needs to take a look at costs associated to configuring that product and procuring all the appropriate components, manufacturing and fabricating the components that are being built in-house, assembly. All of these things need to be working in unison before we can actually develop a quote or a proposal. But what happens in this typical bidding process, right? Well, when we look at the front end, when we're capturing requirements from our customers, a lot of times we'll come across a lot of inconsistencies. There's a lot of miscommunication, and that's due in part to potentially a customer group conveying information to potentially a sales group within your organization, and then your sales group talking with the engineering or design staff, or maybe everyone's all in one room, but there's always information going back and forth, right? The customer will send requirements. They think that they've detailed out the job or the product they need to its full extent, but what happens is that information gets brought into your organization, and then you end up having questions. Hey, these requirements are great, but we need more information. So there's a lot of back and forth, right? And this takes a lot of time because people are generally using email, or they're, oh, well, let's get everyone into a conference call. Well, now we got to look at people's schedules and make sure that everyone's available. And it really like prolongs making sure that both parties understand what the requirements are. But once that is complete, and generally, product configuration may start before it's complete, but we move into the next stage of product configuration. This is when your engineering group or your design group becomes involved in the project, and this is a very long manual effort, right? So you have a lot of manual work going into this. They're taking these initial requirements and starting to actually develop a product, or at least some sort of like I'd say specification document, whether that be CAD or some sort of layout drawing, depending on what your product is. But this generally takes the longest when we take a look at this typical bidding process. And then when we move from product configuration, or even during, like I mentioned up front, into cost estimation, this is where we can start to be a little more inconsistent, right? We have folks taking information from engineering, moving into the estimation group. Estimation group is having to put values, bring values from one system to another, maybe from their, estimation tool, which could very easily be like an Excel document or Google Sheets, and then moving that information into like an ERP system or some sort of CRM system for helping the sales team build out a quote. The problem here is that we start to get duplicate data, right? We're having humans put data from one system to another, and that generally can kind of lead to some inconsistencies in the data. And then very finally, the proposal development. This also is very manual, generally. You may have some automation built into like Excel or some sort of CRM system, which is great, but most of the time this is manual. It's text-based, right? I'm going to present with you a final document, a sheet of paper that documents out, in text, everything that we're going to be doing. And then there's a lot of like information that has to be shared back and forth between the customer and your sales organization to ensure that they understand what it is that your business is doing in order to produce and capture their initial requirements for a product. This can lead to quality issues, right, when there's inconsistencies between the two organizations. I'm going to go on hold for just 1 second. I got a little cough in the back of my throat. Just give me 1 sec. All right, sorry about that, folks. All this talk about typical bidding process just making me so thirsty. But what we're really trying to do here, the overall challenges are long quote times. These give our competitors more opportunity to win the bid. Inaccurate quotes can lead to lost business or even minimal profit margins if you do win. I've been in the industry for a while, and I've talked to a lot of customers about this process, and a lot of our customers are just like, what, sometimes we get our estimation wrong. The project then ends up taking twice as long as we originally thought it was going to take, and they end up like kind of just eating up their own margins, right? And they end up doing this and kind of trying to pat themselves on the back as though, well, at least this is good marketing. We have our name out there, someone bought our product, and they're using, some conveyor system or what have you. So, I mean, there's a lot of overall challenges when it comes to managing this process. And so what we want to do today is kind of take a look at some of the tools that can help you automate this process and basically take you from the slow cooking crock pot to, let's see here, to the Staples Easy Button. Right? I think all of us have seen this, Staples Easy Button. Did you know that when this was released, The first year Staples made this toy, it sold $1.5 million worth. Like, it's just a toy, it's an easy button. But clearly this tells me that everyone wants an easier way to do things, right? In whatever it is that they're doing. And so our goal today is to look at how to get from the Crockpot to the easy button. So there's two methods to implement design automation. And how do we tie the design automation to sales automation? So when we take a look at this entire workflow, you know, you think of design and sales automation as maybe one thing when you saw the presentation title, but in reality, they're two different things, right? Very first thing, design automation. This is when we take a look at the engineering activity, the designer activity, in how they develop, you know, the product in order to be presented back to the customer. And this is design automation. This is generally going to be consumed by tools like CAD, right? Inside of CAD, specifically Autodesk Inventor, we have tools called iLogic, and this allows you to program systematic knowledge into your CAD models to be able to quickly configure them from one customer bid to another. Once we have design automation in place, then we can start to take a look at sales automation. But I will tell you today, this is a sequential process. You can't just jump in and automate sales from a bidding process without automating design. So what we want to do today is we want to take a look at the Autodesk Easy button, which is Configurator 360. So what we're going to do here, we'll kind of flip out. And I'm going to jump right into Autodesk Inventor, and I want to showcase this functionality in here that I actually really love called iLogic. And for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar with Inventor, iLogic is a great tool to kind of program knowledge, or even like tribal knowledge from within the business inside of the interface into your CAD models. So here in this example, I had this kind of tire and wheel configuration. This actually came from the BAC Mono car. They're one of our good customers, and they've decided to share out a lot of their data so that we could use in presentations, which I think is great. I love demonstrating cool products like cars. But what you're going to notice here is that down in my bottom left-hand corner, I have this kind of iLogic management pane, and it's broken out into rules, forms, global forms, and external rules. And while we're not going to get too deep into a lot of these things, I want to just kind of give you a high-level overview as to what rules are inside of iLogic. So if I come into, let's come to this rule called wheel configuration, and I'm going to come to edit. And now don't freak out. I know you're seeing code on the screen. This generally freaks out a lot of people. When I first saw it, I'll admit, when I joined the Autodesk team and saw iLogic, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't know how to code. I'm not a programmer. But I'm telling you, this system makes it super easy to build out this logic into your models. And what I mean by that is on the left-hand side over here, we have system snippets. And what these are basically code just sitting and waiting for you to kind of drag and drop it into the actual code or editing interface. And so what we're doing here is, if you notice, we're taking a look at my wheel, and what we're doing here is we're talking about different parameters within the model. And when we think of a parameter, just think of it as like almost like a variable, right? So if I look at my model, you know, how did I design that? For those of us who have seen CAD, well, you start with a sketch, you apply dimensions to that sketch. Well, why not be able to program information so that dimensions can change based on other dimensions changing? And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're just coming in here and we're saying, hey, if the wheel radius, right, if I change a variable called wheel size or wheel radius, you know, just divide that one by 2 and just make this other dimension half that size, right? So that's all we're really doing here. I'm controlling a parameter, right, a parameter called spokes within my model with a variable called number of spokes. So basically, when I go to configure this model, if I choose a number of spokes, it's going to go into the parameter called spokes inside of my CAD model, which is in reality a kind of like a circular pattern, and it's just going to change that number, right? It's going to change the number of instances in that pattern. I mean, that's what we're doing when we talk about iLogic. right down here. I even put in some code so we remember what it is that I'm controlling here. Does the user want to have a slot put into each of those rim kind of extrusions, right? So here's that feature. Here's the variable. It's like, is it active? Is it not active? If it's not active, if the user doesn't want slots, then just go ahead and suppress that feature. So that's really what we're doing. A lot of that snippet code was actually already pre-programmed in. All I had to specify was, hey, in this model, it's this feature and this variable. And so what we're left with, once we have all that logic built in, I can start to build out forms for ease of use, right? Because although I talk about it being easy, there is still sort of an art to it. And once you have, newcomers to the Inventor interface, why not present them with something a little easier to understand, right? So something like this, where I have this wheel configuration form built in. I've even applied a picture, have kind of changed text to make things look more apparent. And you'll even notice I have some pricing rules. If I look at my rules down here, I even have a pricing rule built into iLogic. And this can be driven from other systems, right? So if I have a system like ERP that could maybe output some sort of Excel document with pricing information, I can reference that Excel document with this rule to drive price inside of my CAD environment, which is great. So up here, what we're taking a look at is these, behind all of these drop-downs or pick lists, I've specified values that the user can choose. Once I come down in here, let's click on 6, what that's doing is it's running the rule in the background of the Inventor tool. And so what you're seeing here is I'm going from a number of spokes of 9 down to a number of spokes of 6. And that goes back to that rule where I've just gone into the CAD model via some code and basically said, hey, in this circular pattern, go from a value of 9 to a value of 6. And what's happening is Inventor in the background is just rebuilding this model. Right? Same thing below that. We can start to control other things. It doesn't have to just be geometry. We can start to control material, appearances, and you'll know all of these materials and appearances are actually driven from the Inventor material library. So all of these can be changed rather quickly. Right? If I want to come down to maybe my caliper and we want to go to a light red, you'll notice my caliper immediately changes values. The coolest part about this is that as I configure things inside of this environment using iLogic, my price actually automatically recalculates each time. So when we talk about that entire bidding process, and we broke it down into the actual design automation versus sales automation. This, what we just looked at inside of Inventor, is the first step, right? Going from just 3D parametric modeling to 3D parametric modeling with logic. And once we can kind of start to encompass and utilize that logic, that's when we're able to essentially, move and start to take a look at sales automation. So, today the whole focus was around Config 360, which is just my little term for Configurator 360. And what I want to do is now take the work I've done inside of Inventor, and I want to bring this into a cloud-based deployment mechanism, and that is Configurator 360. So what you're going to see here is I'm going to go into my browser, and I'm going to come up to my Configurator 360 admin console. And now what you're going to see in the background here is I'm inside of a browser. This application is cloud-based, right? So once I've completed that stuff in iLogic inside of Inventor, I have a button in the interface that says Upload to Configurator 360. And what it does is it uploads that model. If you'll notice down here in the bottom corner, it uploads that model into my product portfolio. Right now, we're on kind of the default Configurator 360 interface, and I am in the back end of the tool as an administrator. And so what I see in the back end is a list of all the products that I have uploaded, their names, the number of instances or sessions people have configured. Right, so you'll notice my wheel has been configured the most. I can even click on this information to get more detailed information about who and when has actually gone in and configured a session. I have the ability as an admin to put in a quote, and more importantly, I have the ability, let me scroll this down a little bit, to specify who can access this product in my configurator online. Right, so right now I have this listed as unrestricted viewing. That means that if anyone comes across my product catalog and the URL address for my wheel assembly, anyone, anywhere in the world with an internet connection and a browser can come in and they can go ahead and they can configure this model. If I chose, I could say, hey, only authorized users. So if I maybe have like a dealer chain, right, and I only want specific people, I don't want just the general public to go in and configure the model, I can specify specific authorized users via email address. Or if it's something I'm just messing around with as an administrator, I'm testing things, I can say only admins can come in and actually configure this model. Over on the left-hand side, we kind of have like quick access buttons for emailing links, specifying parameters, and I'm going to jump into the edit parameters for this wheel assembly because I think this is a somewhat new functionality in this cloud tool. But you'll notice if I come to select parameters, here are all the values that I have basically programmed into my inventor model, and I can drive I'd say form inside of Configurator 360 just using default values here, or if I've created a form in iLogic, I can actually just specify the form I want to use. So if I had more than one, I could actually just pick which one I want. Let's go back to our designs. Now, some of the other options I want to talk about here, if I come to options, we can talk about branding. So what we're doing is, again, we're still on the back end of Configurator 360 as an administrator, and you're probably starting to see, hey, this is actually pretty easy to manage. But what we will do is we'll go to the front end to take a look at what an end user will actually see, and we control as an administrator what they see. So you'll notice here at the top, I have the ability to kind of start customizing my interface for my users. You'll notice, obviously, I'm using the Autodesk company logo, a name, company description. I can even have a link, so if a user clicks on my logo, it takes them to my website. I can specify a color scheme. I can put in terms and conditions if I choose to. I can even hide this little Autodesk Configurator 360 logo about in terms of service if I don't want my customer to see that it's Configurator 360. Another big part of this is that you can embed your Configurator 360 into your own website. So you do not have to use the default website that we'll take a look at soon. You actually can take this and embed it into your own like intranet site. It's completely up to you. Another good part of the administrative function is specifying what types of files users can download once they've gone through a configuration session. So here we're taking a look. I have a huge list on the left-hand side of 2D formats, 3D formats, and image formats that I can choose from, and then I specify maybe a smaller list of what my users actually can use. One of those big ones here you'll notice is Revit, right? And so we have actual architecture output for 3D, which is great if you are a buildings products manufacturer. So you think, I build windows. These windows have to go into buildings that architects construct inside of Revit. I can allow them to configure a model to their specs and then come in and choose an output that's appropriate to their usage. Let's go back now and let's actually jump into this wheel configuration. So what you're seeing now is I just went from being an administrator to the system to being an end user. And now before we actually get into what we're going to configure in this session, I want to talk a little bit about options. I've seen Configurator 360 be used in many different ways. Some of our organizations, or some of our customers I should say, they're going to use Configurator 360 for internal purposes only. Others may use Configurator 360 on their website for their customers. It's entirely up to you how Configurator 360 is used. The thing you need to keep in mind is Configurator 360 is a mechanism of configuration deployment. And what I mean by that is, you know, inside of Inventor I can do the configurations, but generally the only person opening Inventor is an engineer. And you're not going to go to your sales staff and say, hey, sales, here's a license of Inventor so that you can configure a model. No, that's not what we're going to do. That's why we developed Config 360, is we want this to be accessible to an end user in a very easy to understand fashion, making it easy to configure models. But like I mentioned, I've seen Configurator 360 used internally with sales or even just engineering, right? Maybe they want to get a head start on some development or some design that they're going to be working on. They come in, they configure the model here, and then they choose to download an Inventor assembly. And then from there, they can start to make the finer detail changes. I think the most popular means of using this as a deployment tool is for sales. You can have your sales staff have access to Config 360. They may be on the phone with the customer. They may be even sitting right next to the customer, and they can open up Config 360 and start taking in these requirements from the customer. Hey, Mr. Customer, what wheel size are you looking for? How many spokes would you like to have? Would you like a slot in this? What type of brake material would you like us to use? What type of caliper finish would you like us to use? Right? The sales staff is working with the customer to gather the requirements, and at the same time they are building the model. Right? So we're starting to alleviate some of the pressures on your engineering and design staff by automating that design and not having to kind of suck away time from engineering for non-value added activities. So what we're looking at in here is a dynamic viewer inside of the browser, right? So the user comes in, they're able to kind of spin this model around, able to see what this thing looks like. And if I kind of zoom in here so we can see some of these changes. Now, I have the ability, I'm going to turn off this immediate update, I have the ability now as a sales rep or even an end consumer to come in and specify, I like the size of 20, but maybe I don't like the total of 9 spokes, so I'm going to say 9. You'll notice as soon as I make a change to one of these values, Config 360 lets me know that this is out of date. Maybe I want to include some slots in here, brake material. I'm okay with cast iron. I like chrome, but maybe my caliper finish, I want this to be a lighter color. Now, keep in mind, I'm doing this all in a browser. So I'm going to go ahead and update. And while this is updating, I want to talk a little about the power of using cloud tools. Specifically, in this case, your sales rep that's working with the customer, or even if you send a link to your customer, they can actually access this on any device. So they can actually start to configure this model on any device, and it's just more accessible, right? It's a better experience for the customer if they're doing it themselves. But you'll notice what Config 360 does is it quickly updates the model. All of this computation, right, of figuring out what this geometry is going to look like is all done in the cloud. So no local users, Inventor computer is being used in terms of resources. This is all done on the cloud. You'll also notice after all of this has been completed, I now have this read-only version that lets me know, hey, my total price has changed, and it gives that consumer or that customer a great experience. Like, hey, I already know what the price is. God, this looks really good. You'll notice Config 360 even renders out the product after it's sat for a couple of seconds, and it looks really fantastic. And while this is all good, that we can go through and we can make these changes and everything, the real value in Config 360 lies in what that end user gets from it. So if I come to outputs here, these are all the different things I'm able to download. And again, as a business owner, it's going to be your decision as to what information you'd like to give to your customer. Do you want to give them a native Inventor assembly file? Maybe not. But if it's being used internally for engineers to kind of quickly start their designs, then yeah, I mean that would make a lot of sense. Maybe you want to give some image files. Maybe you want to share some bill of material information. All of this information can be extracted from the model that's being configured inside of this browser session. So super powerful in terms of being able to output information once a configurator session has been completed. So if I move towards the bottom here, one thing I'd like to point out is quoting capabilities. Now, as a sales rep within your organization works with your customer, maybe once they complete this configurator session, they have the means of producing a quote on the fly. We do have the ability to tie into other business systems. So if you want to take information from here and push that into another business system, you have that ability. But you also have the ability to produce a quote directly within the Config 360 interface. So I'll choose quote here, and what will happen is on the user's machine, it's going to download a PDF. And what I've done here is I have basically generated a custom document that reads in the configuration, places specific images in my document, and then shows them all of the options that they selected along with the price. And obviously I have my company logo and everything at the top. So this image or this document is entirely flexible. You can do what you want with it. You can make it look however you want it to look. You know, I talked at the beginning of how we tend to just share documents. You know, here's my quote, here's my proposal, sir, and it's going to be a lot of text, right? It's not visual. This experience of giving someone the ability to configure something in 3D and then giving them the option for an output, you know, a quote right on the fly. I mean, that's just like a great customer or buying experience that your customer is going to experience. So I think this is very, 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 it's very fast, right? It's very intuitive. I know there are some configurators on the market out there. The ones I like the best are when you go to like a vehicle, like an auto manufacturer's website, you go to Ford, Jaguar, Lexus, Mercedes, a lot of them have configurators built into their website with predefined options. Hey, do you want this option? Do you want that option? Do you want low rim, low profile, you know, tires? Do you want heated fogged mirrors? Do you want the color to be red? Do you want it to be blue? And you go through and you can like kind of start to configure stuff. I mean, it's just such a good experience that, you know, if we can tie that into our sales process as well, I mean, why wouldn't you take a look at technology like this? So I'm going to close this out. Very last thing is if you don't want to use this quoting download option, there is a request a quote field built into Configurator 360, and you can kind of customize what this looks like, but you do have the ability to kind of capture information from the user who's configuring, you know, who's inside of Configurator 360 and is looking through, you know, maybe ideas and this and that. You can capture information from them, and this information will then be sent to the administrator of the system or whatever email address that you've specified within the system. So kind of another quick thing I want to show you real quick. I'm going to fire up my iPad. We'll see if this works. So if you've never heard of this app, it's called Airplay. I love it. It's so nice for sharing information across the web. I'm going to come into, and what I want you to see here is that, you know, what I was showing originally was on my desktop. Like I'm running off of my laptop. You know, I'm just in my Chrome browser. I can do the same thing here on my iPad. So if you think about feasibility, the benefits of cloud, right? I have all of that here inside of my mobile app, right? So again, I can like sit here with my customer. I can start to configure things. I get the same experience on my iPad that I do sitting at my desk. So super powerful in terms of accessibility and benefits, you know, benefits of using cloud software. So I'll kind of close this down. And I think what I want to do now, we'll just jump back into PowerPoint here. So we talk a little bit about automation adoption. I've kind of mentioned this, but you know, how do we get from this slow manual bidding or quoting process to the easy button, right? Well, there are some steps, and you know, it's the phrase, you know, don't try to boil the ocean. Let's start small. If you're working in 2D design and engineering, you're going to want to maybe start taking a look at 3D, right? Well, what 3D tools can I use? You know, I'll tell you this, if you want to get into this design and sales automation, I do highly recommend using Autodesk Inventor because of the iLogic functionality. Little side story, I actually used to work with SolidWorks, and you know, it's a great tool, but the iLogic functionality is so pivotal. When I came and started using Inventor, it was the first thing I gravitated towards because I was like, wow, this is true engineering automation. And you know, we haven't even gotten into even a little bit of the iLogic capabilities. This can even drive like manufacturing drawings. I mean, it's great what that technology can do. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start, if you're working in 2D or using AutoCAD today to kind of build out stuff, maybe start taking a look at 3D, right? Maybe we should start designing in 3D. Visuals are always great. You obviously have tons of benefits of designing in 3D, extracting a lot of information, bill of material information, manufacturing, print information. You can start to analyze and prototype your designs before you fabricate and spend money on physical prototyping. And then once you've gotten to that point, that's when you can start to take a look at iLogic, right? And I'll admit, I've had folks who have gone into the Inventor software and immediately started using iLogic. I'm not saying you can't do these things quickly. I'm just saying generally you have to do one before the other. And then once you have that design automation in place, let's have a conversation about Configurator 360. So I would say if you guys are using Inventor today, feel free to reach out to your applied engineering sales rep to have a deeper conversation of what Configurator 360 can do for you. So with that, that went a little quicker than I thought today. I want to kind of open this up for any questions people may have. Feel free to type in any questions into the dialog box in the GoToMeeting pane. One question I know I had was pricing. Like how is Config 360 deployed? Well, there are two different levels of Config 360. We have Configurator 360 Standard, and we have Unlimited. And so what happens here is Config 360 Standard allows you to have 3,000 configuration sessions per year. You also are entitled to one administrator. So if you imagine what I was doing in the back end, I'm uploading data, I'm managing the versions that have been uploaded, I'm choosing who has permission to configure these things, I have the ability to look at metrics of who's worked on and configured this product. There's one administrator per standard subscription, and each standard subscription gets you 3,000 configuration sessions. Now, you may think, well, what's a configuration session? When I go into Config 360 and I log into a URL and I can configure multiple products, but as soon as I close that window or the timeout occurs and I get kicked out after inactivity, that is one configuration session. We even have some kind of tools in here that if your browser crashes for some reason, you have like a certain amount of time to get back in to Config 360 and continue the session that you are working on, and that does not consume a second session. So Configurator 360 Standard, again, 3,000 configuration sessions, one administrator. You can purchase as many subscriptions as you want. Ultimate, or I should say Unlimited, is exactly that. It's unlimited configuration sessions and unlimited administrators. If you think you're somewhere in between, like 3,000 is not enough, I'm going to have my dealer network be working in here, and I got 25 dealers, they all may be configuring on a daily basis, but I don't think I need unlimited. You can just buy multiple standard subscriptions. So maybe you want to buy 2 or 3, it's completely up to you. You can even just start with one standard subscription and then, hey, as an administrator, you have the ability to monitor and track the usage. Well, I want to be notified when my configuration sessions get to 100 or 150 left. The admin can be notified via email, and then at that point, if you want, you can just go buy another subscription of standard, and then that can just grow with you. It's a subscription, right? So each year you can kind of choose if you want to continue with both subscriptions or you just want to continue with one or the other. We try to make it as easy as possible, and again, that's the power of using cloud software. Another thing I should mention with this, and I saw a question about this, is updating, right? Like service packs and stuff like that. There are no service packs. There is no like yearly update. There is no Config 360 2016 or Config 360 2017. This is a cloud-based product, and what I mean by that is we push out updates on a like bi-monthly schedule. So the development team working in Configurator 360 is pushing out updates every 4 to 8 weeks with new features and functionality. So a lot of that is driven by our customers and what our customers want to see inside of this Configurator tool. So I recommend once you start using, please feel free to get in touch with our team to let them know, what type of functionality you'd like to see inside of the interface. So those are the only questions I saw. Does anyone else have questions here? Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, we definitely appreciate your time today. Again, my name is Dan Luby, Cloud Manufacturing Technical Specialist at Autodesk. Feel free to shoot me an email, daniel.luby@autodesk.com with any questions, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.